we'll recap last week very briefly. So tech foundations, very obvious, right? DNS, domain, mailbox setup, we got all that. Very fundamental. We've done those from the beginning for the most part. There's small improvements that come here and there. Ramping warm-up for domains and mailboxes, discuss that. So just the way the cadence works and then maintaining that warm-up. Domain age. So the longer their life, better. Not always possible. They're doable at a month, but if we can keep one alive, working well for 6 to 8 months, we're going to start seeing tremendously better results and hit inboxes we could never otherwise hit. Sending methodology, and then I highlighted this because we kind of skimmed over this last week, but the biggest one that is actually the hardest to manage and the most obscure as well is engagement signals. So that's things like email replies, clicks, opens, spam reports, spam rescues. And I don't mean us tracking those things, but I mean the ESP actually tracking interactions with our emails. So we can do everything right, and an email can have basically no replies, let's say 0.5% for a month and a half. And it could already affect that email or all those mailboxes so significantly, or just kill them entirely just because of the no engagement. Same thing, you can have decent replies and get like 20 spam reports, and you're probably going to struggle because it's going to try throwing you in spam. And then you're going to have a hard time recovering, especially early on. Having more emails obviously makes it better because you're not going to get 10 spam reports are going to even out across, let's say 70 emails. So it helps, but you still might run the risk of like, if you have one domain and it has 3 mailboxes and 2 of them get flagged for spam, it might just assume your whole domain is bad. So there's multiple levels that things are gauged at. So what falls in with that is fingerprinting. Does anybody know what fingerprinting is? I want to give a 1 sentence explanation of what they think it is. I guess it's already on the screen. No? Kyle, you do it. You're a veteran.
Fingerprinting? When it comes to emailing, I don't know. I'll take a shot in the dark. No idea here, actually, but I'm just assuming that like your reputation, right? Your email's reputation. And I don't know, no idea actually.
Close. I think I've actually never brought it up with you. Okay, that's fair. Micah?
If I had to guess, I would say fingerprinting is something to avoid. Because I know in the past we've had discussions where there's specific things not to include in cold email, specific language that can be subjected to being commonly listed for spam purposes. So maybe fingerprinting is being connected to those patterns that typically are connected to spam. That's my best guess.
Excellent. It's exactly what it is. So what is that saying? If it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, probably a duck. I don't know.
It's a duck.
Whatever it is. That's basically the way it works with email as well. So on an ESP level, right? If they see this type of email, it's not even that bad, but something like this, want to collaborate or quick question, Alex, question mark, and everything's the same. The intro is the same. Everything's the same as every other cold email. AI can, even machine learning, can pick up these patterns so easily, right? It's not hard. So it's just going to try to throw you in spam eventually, because if you look like all the other cold emails, chances are you might be one too. And doesn't necessarily happen when you send one, but what happens when you send 1,000 of them that are all the same in 1 week? You're going to run into problems because they're going to attempt to throw you into spam. If you don't get recovered or get marked spam, actually, then you're going to struggle getting your emails back to good health. And that can apply to every part of the email. So the subject, the opener, CTAs, the done of the email structure, the less patterns you have that match with common cold email patterns, especially ones that go to spam, the better. And some are okay. Like you can say hi name, everyone does that. They're not going to burn your account and lock you out for that, but just being aware of like your structure of email and how basic or generic it is. One thing that helps obviously is spin tax, if done right. So spin tax at least lets you avoid, everyone knows what spin tax is and how it works, right? It spins your syntax. So you use synonyms, and essentially at least lets you send more variations. So even if you get fingerprinted, they're not picking up that you're sending 1,000 of the same emails. They look somewhat different. Even better, now with John, we set up spin tax in a way that you have massive fragments, not just synonyms of words, but entire sentence fragments that can be structured differently. So having that variation can also help you get away from it, or using custom variables that actually pertain to them. So mentioning things that are specific to the company may be better than I've been a fan of your business, and then you enter the business name with wrong letters or LTD at the end, and then you mention some obtruse, like number of years. Instead, you actually use custom variables that are like well put together. It could be like liquid spin tax, might be something in clay where you say, based on how many years you've worked there, I blah, 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 whatever you say, but the more relevant it can sound to them and the more variance you can have between your emails sent out from the same domains and mailboxes, again, the further you can get away from fingerprinting, especially within your own domains. Avoiding spammers is an obvious one. That's something we always do. Sometimes there's ones that you can't get around, right? Like even call at this point might be a spam word because it's used so much, but things like free, offer, buy now, can I have your credit card? All those weird ones that you can imagine are not going to go over well for you. So John generally knows for the most part what to avoid, but there's also spam checkers that we have, like I think Mail Meteor and some other ones that you can run things through, and it'll give you a rough score of like what's good and what's bad. Instantly actually also does it for us now. And that's pretty much it. And then just unique syntax structure. So thinking down of things like, email signature, like there's a very basic way that people format their cold email signatures. So for what we can do is we can either use syntax, we can move things around, we can stack things on one line, abbreviate names, maybe even add like the location, which people don't do. But whatever sets you apart, even if it's in a non-meaningful way, it sets you apart from other cold emails, which generally benefits you in the long term and the short term. And that's pretty much all fingerprinting. Any questions on this or why this is important? Good. So obviously this will play into what we talked about earlier, all the engagement signals, right? Like the better you can have these things, the more likely you'll land in an inbox and the more likely you'll get a reply.
This
So
is
they all
like
work.
where it comes into the art of it rather than the science.
That's right.
Dan?
Yeah. I would say most of getting great results or having great deliverability is actually an art, not a science. All the technical stuff, like we know how this works. Warm-up's been tested for so long and you can mess around with it a little bit, but it makes no difference compared to how much you send. Like, some of the best performing campaigns we've had for years, we can just not change the email forever because we get such high replies. It can overshadow everything. But unless your numbers are there, which they rarely are, you got to put in the work to be able to get there first. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, just quickly, Dan, to that thing about if you get a lot of replies, it might not get flagged. So if I'm understanding correctly, technically you could send 1 million of the same emails, but if people are engaging with it, then Microsoft or whatever won't flag it. Even if
it overshadows a lot. If you start getting a lot of replies or interactions with people and they're all organic and back and forths, it's just a reason for them not to really care because those are emails, especially if you're talking to emails that are reputable. So not warm-up emails don't have as much of an impact because they're also new, right? But if you're messaging companies that they know are reputable, they've been around for years and years, they have their own reputation score. When you interact with them, it affects you really positively. So like what's a chamber? I'm pretty sure. Is Danae here? Probably still see your screen.
I'm here.
Like, I'm pretty sure there was a time it didn't change their emails for like months. No, Danae?
Oh, yeah.
Like literally months. And they only got better somehow.
What was the same thing I think we mentioned last time? It was like we would decrease their volume, but they were just getting so many replies that you could tell we were probably hitting like everyone's inbox. So yeah, no, I don't know. I think maybe we've done like 4 copy changes in the 1.5 years that they've been with us.
We're just built up so much reputation and good results that like, just like it takes time to build up, whatever, strength in the gym, it takes time to break it down as well. Once you do, it's tough to get back up there. Anyway, but yeah, that's how it works. We put a lot of emphasis on this part because this is really what gets us to those high results, and then we can maintain them. I'm just going to go to the next page. Provider ESP matching. So this is another part that's very much art. We're still somewhat figuring it out. It can be really beneficial. So ESP matching is essentially matching the provider and our mailbox host. So the ESP for our mailbox, let's say we use Google, and whatever our lead uses as their email provider. So we'll pull a lead list, we'll put it into Instantly, and it'll show us that lead uses Microsoft or Zoho, Yahoo, Google, whatever it is. By matching the ESPs, it is very likely that ESPs prefer each other. So when Google sees an email from Google, they just automatically assume it's safer because it's their infrastructure. Same for Microsoft. It makes a much big difference with Microsoft. I don't have actual numbers for you guys, but I can find some for next week, which is awesome. So once things are built up optimally, you could just send from Google to Google and Microsoft to Microsoft. In a perfect world, everything would get better results. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite work that way. The limitations you run into is that we tend to have more Google emails than Microsoft emails. And depending on the lead batch that you pull, some might have all Microsoft or all Google. So it's going to limit your sending because then you can't utilize them at all. So you're going to have to do a smart split with it. And another problem you run into early on is we know that Microsoft is really, really hard to hit. And because engagement signals are so important, if we only send from Microsoft to Microsoft and we get no replies, who can guess what's going to happen to those emails in the first 3 weeks?
Dead.
They'll be dead. Yeah. They're going to get no replies, no engagement. They'll be completely useless. So actually specifically using them to send to Google, which is something we tried a while ago, completely changed our results because Google sends so many more replies. Like we get in so much easier with them in general that sending from Microsoft and Google to Google only in the beginning gives our emails such a boost in numbers when compared to also sending to Microsoft, which builds their health up. And then later we can adjust that. And now that we have some health built up, some longevity, a bunch of organic replies, now we can start doing some retargeting. There's a lot of limitations with this. We don't yet know if it's also the best move long-term, because there could be an aspect to it where obviously the provider can also see who's sending to them. So if every single email that we send is from Microsoft and only goes to a Microsoft lead, that could also be something that's picked up by infrastructure. So we're always playing around with like how we use provider matching and what it does for us, but it is something you guys can bring up on a call or on a sales call, that it is something we do use, but I wouldn't try to give them a full run through because we're always adjusting it based on what we see gets us the best results. And depending on the target market too, how many leads of what type and what types they have. Yeah, that's a top level rundown. There's a lot more to this. It's not worth diving into this for an hour, to be honest. Does anybody have any questions or want clarifications on anything when it comes to ESP matching? Good. Cool.
I guess maybe I may need some clarification just from how it goes from Microsoft to Google. Like what's that process like?
So organically, right? The way you actually set it up is instantly. I was going to, do I have a screenshot of it? Yeah, it's this. So if you have this disabled, what happens is just any mailbox you have added to a campaign will just go through its rotation, 1 3 month 15 will just send to anyone. Well, you can set up routing rules, which are, for example, Google can only send to Google, or Microsoft can only send to Microsoft, or Microsoft can send to other, blah, blah, blah. You can set up any rule that you want, depending on which ESP you have and what you allow them to send to. So in the beginning, for example, we disable Microsoft, which is something we'll talk about more in the future because it's so hard to hit with no age, but it pads our results. And again, better percentages of results early are really important for getting our email health up. And then later on, we can start removing that, for example, letting everyone send to everyone, or doing some tests and seeing, okay, if we actually just send Microsoft to Microsoft, do we get even better numbers because it just outperforms only sending to Microsoft? And then Google can hit maybe Google or others. So there's multiple like configurations you can set up to see what gets you the best results. And we're going to run some tests on this in the next few months, and then we'll give you guys probably some better reportings. But it's a very cool feature. I think most companies either don't use it or use it very poorly. I wish I had the SOP for this. For some reason, I couldn't find it. But I'll give you guys a rundown. CS will already know how this works. But mailbox rotation and batching, super important. Probably one of the best things we implemented, honestly, because before this, we would have mailboxes that would die. And then me and Danae would lose our minds because we were for 3 weeks. Then we'd have to buy new mailboxes, make up some excuse to the customer, and just, let them yell at us every week until we have new emails to send out of, which was terrible. So instead, we spend more money and we have 2 identical batches that we set up. One is actively sending. They start at the same time, right? So they both ramp. One begins sending, the other one sits in backup. And there's 2 big purposes to it. First one is obviously to protect ourselves. If one of these domains dies or multiple die or we think they're dead, we have a backup ready immediately that we can switch to. We have full time to replace the other one and there's no disruption in service. It's massive for us, super, super important. The other one is maintenance. So regular rotation. So if over 6 months, we send 6 months, obviously your risk is much higher to land in spam more. We send more emails or might go cold, it's more repetitive. If we have 2 batches and out of 6 months, we're only sending for 2.5 or 3 with one set of a batch, our chances of surviving are obviously much higher, right? Like much less chances to land in spam. The emails are cooling down for a super long time because they're still warming. All their rates are inflated artificially. So by using a rotation system, it can keep them healthier. Also, it's us gauge, right? So generally after 2 months of sending, we'll swap the other batch in and do a slow swap. And if we suddenly see the numbers are way better, that can also give us an indicator of that actually the other batch is actually doing probably badly. It might have some health issues. And then we can make adjustments, and same vice versa. And the third case being if for some reason, or the customer, let's say, hits their 3rd month or 4th month, we know they're not going to re-sign. If we need to up the volume, we now are able to actually double their output, if not more. There's a risk there, obviously, because if we do that and we end up killing them all at the same time, massive issues. So we don't do it for extended periods of time. But it gives us a lot of room to play with in case things die, in case something comes up, in case they got to hit really, really large results for 2 to 4 weeks. Make sense? The way we have the timeline for that setup is, as I mentioned, 2 months of sending. Then we have 1 month where we slowly swap the other one in. So we'll set both of them to half the volume just so the cadence is even out, right? So instead of putting the new batches in and your sending goes from 0 to 1,000, which looks bad, as we discussed last week, want to avoid that. We do a slow swap. And then after that month, the other one stays active for 2 months. And the one that was active previously is now going to be warming up again. Cool. Massive part. Obviously, this gets us to longer email health. It protects us. Lets us test directly for results. Even if we don't use open rates to test, how well are we landing in inboxes, reply rates can still give us a good gauge. Given that those emails have been created at the same time, they're identical batches. If we ever wanted to run both of them and test, is one performing better than the other? We can do that. Whereas before, If you only have one batch, you really can't do that because there's too many variables within it. So super important feature. I would definitely mention this to people. I mean, anybody who's onboarded should already be aware of this, but I think it's important that our customers are aware of it because for the most part, we spend extra money to keep their emails alive longer, not have to burn and turn them all the time. And it also protects them in case something goes wrong. Any questions on this or how this affects or impacts deliverability? No?
No questions on it. It just seems really straightforward and like an awesome solution. Is there like a case to be made for doing like a triple rotation instead of a double one?
Yes and no. Triple as in buying a third batch to rotate in.
Yeah.
It'd be too expensive for the trade-off. This is very expensive for us. So adding another batch adds like several hundred US of overhead for us. Where it would make sense is, and Kyle would have this, for example, where we just want more results for them. Things are going really well. They're super happy, but we actually want double the output. So what we can do is we can buy a third batch. Generally, we don't buy Microsoft because it's just quite expensive. We don't need an extra one of it. And then we'll actually keep 2 batches active. And then when we rotate, we always just rotate 1 out. So we'll have 3 batches, 1 backup, 2 active. And this is something we do with a client where, you know, it's worth the investment. We know we're going to get results. They're going to stay on. It's not something we do in month 3 when they're failing because it's pointless, right? You're going to buy them, warm them up, send for a week. They're going to cancel and you spent $400 US for no reason. Yeah. It's usually best done with a client who's been on. They're about to actually re-sign.
They're happy. They already kind of re-signed and you want to ramp results. That makes sense.
Yeah. So that's usually the case where we do it off the bat. It just doesn't make sense. It's not worth the cost, but adding one in later on, or if a client needed to, you know, the client needed more volume, but it's within reason. Could we double these and just charge them more? Totally. There is a client we just had with Joel and Tristan I met with yesterday who wanted like 140,000 emails a month sent. Can we do that? No. Some companies can because they have different infrastructure. We need to hire 2 CSMs just for that account. That just makes no sense for us, right? Like that volume of emails just doesn't work for us. But, you know, if let's say we're generally sending like, I think it's roughly between 6,000 and 9,000 emails a month. You know, can we double that? Maybe even triple it. The client's willing to pay and like, we know it's going to work for sure. But our infrastructure is set up for like very methodical, slow approach. The CS handles all those replies manually. So there is cost that we're adding on every time we're trying to go outside of these boundaries.
And just so you know, the lead gen companies that promise they can hit that volume, their setup for their company is completely different. They have all of their employees are in the Philippines. So their overhead cost of like labor is like 1/5 of what ours would be. And then they just mass buy stuff and they don't have copywriters. They just use AI and stuff like that. So like they're willing to purchase more emails and to sacrifice quality for quantity. So when you're explaining the difference between our service versus other people's, that's going to be the main one. Because most people, I would argue like we have the most white glove, like local kind of built company for lead gen compared to anyone else. Like that's got to be one of our biggest differentiators.
Yeah. And generally what they're going to be looking for, we won't be able to deliver, right? They might want 1,000 leads a month. They don't care about the quality. They don't care if their emails burn or if they have no leads after a month. For us, it's just not sustainable. It just doesn't work with our setup. So it doesn't make sense for us to try to find clients like that because it's just not the experience that they are looking for or what we're offering.